Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special guest, ZS Diamanti. How are you doing today?
Hey man, I'm doing great. How you doing?
Pretty good. I tried doing my best Italian, but it wasn't quite there, so we'll
Your
have to
best
edit that out
Italian.
later. Yeah,
Diamanti,
Italiano.
Diamanti.
I'm sure that I'm doing a lot better after my chicken parm from last Sunday. But yeah.
You really gotta use your hands when you say
Yeah,
it,
you
right?
really
Really,
gotta.
like
I was
really get
noticing,
the
I'm like,
hands in
nobody's seeing me down here, so I had to kind of come up. It was too late.
there.
But I really appreciate you coming on today. I saw your book a while back, saw you on TikTok, and I was like, follow. Let's try and get this happen. I have been going through a little bit with Stone and Sky. I did buy, your Preludes book one. Sorry, your
Yeah,
Preludes novella as well. I love the covers of both, by the
cool.
way. So I'm
Yeah,
really excited that we could get you on and
amazing.
ask you some questions. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
excellent,
I
excellent.
I'm
Uh,
like over the moon about the covers, really.
yeah. No, stoked. As soon as I saw the Stone and Sky, I was like, click that,
Yeah.
buy that. I think I pre-ordered actually. I was like, or whatever. I was like, boom, boom. My wife, she goes, I think that's the quickest that you've ever bought a book. And when that's saying a lot, I was like, it's got a griffin on the cover.
I mean,
So
how can you argue with a griffin on the cover?
exactly. Yep. She goes, well, you just like that because you're writing another book that has a griffin. I was like, yeah. I was
Yeah,
like, that's how tropes
duh.
work.
Yes, that
So I
is
love
exactly.
me
You
some
got it.
Griffin tropes. So yeah, totally. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I'm really excited to ask you these questions. Like I said, I have a Griffin Riders
Yeah,
thing going myself, so I'm like so excited. I feel like I'm a kid in a candy store. I finally, there's
I
all these
know,
different
right?
people writing different stuff, but it's still hard to find people who, are kind of doing those same tropes and things. So I'm excited
Yeah,
to pick your brain today. So we'll go with
love
that
it.
first
Yeah,
question
no.
there. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
It's been crazy. Let's call it like it is. Uh, so I'm a veteran. I
Oh,
was Air
cool.
Force. I was Air Force medical,
Oh,
and
cool.
I went to Afghanistan and everything else, right? Uh, Afterwards, I started writing
Mm,
because I like it helped me kind of put some things out, right? And
yeah.
get stuff out, right? And work it out. And I actually ended up writing like a whole bunch of, literary nonfiction,
Oh,
essays,
wow.
articles. And then I ended up kind of moving into like the horror genre. And
Mm.
I actually got to publish sell a whole bunch of horror short stories, which
Oh, that's
was
cool.
so much fun, right? But if eventually I was like, okay, I'm ready to write books. I want to write some books. And I knew for a fact I got to write fantasy. So that's where we're going to go, right? That's where we're going to start. And it's hilarious because Stone and Sky has been almost published ready, aside from its its final edits. It was in the final edits phase, pretty much ready since last December, but I didn't release it
Oh, wow.
until August 29th. And let me just tell you how painful that was.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
you're like, oh, this book, I'm doing all this work. I'm working for months and months and months, and this book isn't out. And what am I gonna do? Like, this is horrible. Am I wasting all my time? What am I doing? Right. And eventually, actually it was great because what happened was I got to write all the prelude stories, which has been really
Mm.
fun, and I've been able to give those away as free stories for people to read about characters that show up in the book, right? So
Oh, cool.
that's been really cool. So that's helped me kind of establish and build a readers list and that kind of thing over the last several months. And so I really have spent almost all of this year really building all the foundation stuff and building the
Yeah, yeah.
business side of stuff, starting to find people, figuring out book talk and all of that stuff, just like, they tell you to do. And so it's been kind of crazy. And then I finally got to release a little less than a month ago at this point. So I'm like, yes, finally.
That's a really long and painful process. And I did talk
It
to Scott
is,
Drakeford
man.
about that too, Rise of the Mages, where, like with Tor and where he was like same thing, and then he was all ready, and then bam, pandemic, and then he was all ready, and then bam, they
Yeah.
had supply issues. So it took him like I think almost an extra week. I think let's look back at the interview. I think it was like almost 2 years, like a little bit over that, where it was like,
Dude.
that was like building. He's like, I was writing book two and doing this and that. He's like, but it was like very, very
Yeah.
painful. I'm like, I get that. I'm like that makes total
Yeah.
sense to me. But
Yeah, I mean, I finished the first draft of book two the week I published book one, and I was like,
Oh wow.
oh, okay, so this has been painful, but also like I'm doing pretty good now. There's a book ahead already. This is
Yeah,
good to
yeah, yeah,
go.
yeah.
We're doing
No,
good.
that's awesome.
This is a good process here.
We're getting there. We're getting there. Well, that's awesome. I
That's
was really
right.
excited
That's
because I
it.
didn't even know you were doing preludes. I mean, I was like, I see him all the time on TikTok, and then all of a sudden it was just like, I think it was like, 'cause I follow you on Amazon, and this is why I do it all the time. And I stress to people, I'm like, because you're just gonna miss stuff because of algorithms and stuff. And
Yeah,
I think it's
yeah,
just crazy because I try and like, save certain things and like certain things, share things, because I want people to keep popping up. So I was so
yeah, yeah,
surprised to see your preludes, and it like came up for me on Amazon instead of on TikTok.
yeah.
And I
Oh,
was
see,
like,
that's good to
what is
hear.
going on? Yeah, 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 yeah. So I
That's
was like really
awesome.
surprised. So I tell people all the time,
Yeah,
like, go in, follow the author, and it's nice because I'm got a lot going on. It notifies me, right, when you add
yeah,
that. So
right.
I went in and I kind of
That's
felt,
cool.
kind of felt gypped from TikTok, you know what I mean? I was like, I was like, how dare you not be the first
You're
one,
like, why are you not
to
showing me this? He's obviously been
yeah.
talking about this for months.
Yeah. And then of course it was like bam, 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 bam. It was all preludes for a little bit. And I was just like, the algorithm's
Yeah.
crazy. But I just
Okay.
think, it's
Now,
it's good for people to know,
I I'm in TikTok's defense. Not that I like could go around defending TikTok by any means, but in TikTok's defense, I was telling people about Stone and Sky, right? I was
Yeah, yeah,
telling
yeah.
people, letting them know, and of course, I was telling them that there are free preludes, right?
Mm.
But I didn't actually put this book together until about a month before. I guess it was about a month and a half before Stone and Sky came out.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so once I had everything set on Stone and Sky, I I had always wanted to do this and put all these into a collection, but it was like, if I can do it, I'll do it, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
after
No,
setting
totally.
up Stone and Sky, I was like, dude, I can do this. I'm doing this. And I formatted it out and put all the pretty pictures in it and made it all pretty. And then I was like, boom, it's out. And I didn't really even tell anybody it was coming. So you're the second one that's actually told me that was
Oh, that's funny.
oh man, I was following you on Amazon and I got an email saying you had a book just come out, drop like that day. And I was like, no way, that's awesome,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's
So
always funny
hey,
because I don't ever hear anybody say anything about, they're like, oh, that was weird. I never had anybody say, "Oh, follow me on Amazon." And I think
yeah,
it's so
sure.
weird because I'm like,
Yeah,
that's all I do now, and I'm
yeah,
like, it's just strange to me. So I keep thinking to myself, like, I'm gonna tell people all the time just to keep, to follow me on Amazon
yeah.
when I get my profile up because it does
That's
really help so you don't miss
no
anything.
joke. No joke. I have it so with all of my socials in all like every time I put my socials anywhere, like in my links or in my
Mm.
my readers list and newsletter update, right? I all of my
Oh yeah.
social links, the Amazon one is right next to it. Every single
Oh
one. Just
nice.
because you never I mean, if people follow you there, if they miss something, they're
Yeah,
gonna get
yeah.
an email from Amazon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's nuts because I had just talked to a bunch of my friends that do a bunch of Kindle. They're the ones that got me into Kindle, and I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was actually mentioning like that circumstance. I was like, yeah, and this Preludes book came out. I was like really glad I saw it, and they're like, wait, what do you mean? I'm like, you can follow authors. They're like, oh, I don't do that. I'm like, I just had
Dude, you
5 pop
should.
up
Yeah.
today. Yeah, and I'm like, I just keep
Yeah.
adding stuff to my list, my wish
I
list.
know.
So I
I
just
know.
like, which is horrible because I have like a TBR mountain range now, not
It'll
just a
never,
hill
yeah,
or a
it'll
pile.
never end.
Yeah, it's really
It'll
funny.
never
But
end.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I have to say, I just absolutely like, I didn't even read what the Preludes was about. I just saw the cover and I was just like, yeah, that's me. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, that's just something I'm gonna read. And I was like, yep, that's definitely happening. So I just was like, that's my thing. My wife, I didn't tell her, but I was like, I actually bought Preludes, I think, quicker than Stone and Sky. So I think that's actually,
Yeah.
it's like the UFC, right? Fastest knockout. So for me, that was like, that was
Yeah.
the cover. I was just like,
Boom,
yep,
boom.
like it's your
Yeah.
book. Yeah, bada bing, bada boom.
I know.
So yeah.
It is really, I mean, my artist did an incredible job painting
Yeah, yeah,
this
yeah. Like
and
I just love
and
like
then
the anatomy, and then she just looks amazing. I mean, and everything I want
oh, yeah.
in a book is like right there. And I thought
Right?
this the
Yeah.
lettering too, the coloring, like as a
Oh,
design
thank you.
teacher, like it
Yeah.
just makes me I'm like, yes, like that's fantasy,
Yeah.
And I really like Stone
So
and Sky
the
too, but that
painter,
one was
I
really
hired a
good.
painter. I hired a
Oh yeah,
painter
yeah.
to
That's
do
the way
this.
to go.
And
Yep.
then I did all the graphics, all the
Oh,
design
nice.
elements afterwards because I also have a background in that as well. So
Oh,
I
nice.
was
Well, I
like,
know who I'm
I
gonna
was like,
contact.
hey, here's what I want. I want somebody else to paint it for me because I want
Yeah, yeah.
somebody else's style, not my own. I can do all the other stuff. Like you guys don't have to worry about that. Just paint it. Paint me a beautiful epic classic style fantasy painting and I'll take care of the rest. And that's what I went
Yeah,
with.
yeah. Oh man, no, it looks excellent. I think it sells itself personally. So yeah, I was really excited when I saw that. I was like, this is awesome. So obviously we're talking about fantasy here, but in terms of
Of
what
course.
genre you're currently writing, but I'm curious as to what niche or subgenre you would put yourself in or classify yourself in,
Sure.
and why did you pick that one exactly?
Yeah, so Stone and Sky kind of falls into the classic style fantasy, is what I always say. It's
It's my
classic
jam.
style fantasy. It's
Yeah.
magic, adventures, magical weapons, and heroes trying to figure out how to wield them, and going on adventures and finding out mysteries about different magics and sorcerers and other awesome things, right? Think very much I think it's technically called nowadays. It's called uh, epic fantasy adventure is what it's
Hmm.
called nowadays.
Oh,
But
interesting. I didn't know
it's
that.
it's that very classic style fantasy, going on an adventure and trying to find yourself and trying to overcome insurmountable odds with friends who are unique and boisterous and just fun to hang out with, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to write something that was just fun, just plain
Yeah, yeah.
fun. I love old stories. I love the old classic fantasy stories. Uh, the Hobbit is one of my all-time
Mm.
favorites, which is, of course, many people's all-time favorite, right? But as a kid, I didn't have glasses, but I needed them real bad. And like I would even lay down on my books to try and read them. It was that bad, right? And then I get in trouble for laying down on my book when I was supposed to be reading, right? So reading was a chore for me when I was a kid. But man, somebody put The Hobbit in my hand, and dude,
Mm.
it didn't matter how long it was going to take me. I was going to finish that book, and I loved it. And of course, when I eventually got glasses as an adult, because the Air Force was like, bro, you need glasses. Like you need to be able to see. Oh, yeah, that would probably be helpful. Um, I can read. It would change my
This is what
world,
I
right?
look like.
Uh, is this what everything looks like, right? This is how you guys see. Uh, but I mean, when I got glasses, I got to discover people like R.A. Salvatore and
Love
Richard Lee
Bob, yeah.
Byers, and you're just like, oh, dude, yes. And it's just like fantasy, epic fantasy fun, and like it didn't. There's fantasy that takes itself really seriously, and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
sometimes goes overboard for me to the point where I'm like, I'm just not having fun reading this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
No,
then
totally.
there's fun fantasy where we're going on an adventure and it's just classic and good old fashioned fun.
I think that's a great way to describe it. I don't know why I didn't think of that, but like yeah, like I love Bob's work. I had Richard on. He was awesome. He wants to come back. I was like, he's one of they're two of the three
Yes,
main reasons that
yes.
I want to write. Elaine Cunningham. I love Elaine's
Yeah,
work from Forgotten Realms. I just love the Forgotten Realms books. And that's why people always ask me, they're like,
yeah,
like what do you like to write and read? I was like, Forgotten Realms type fantasy. So yeah, just like and then it's funny because people always ask me like, do you have this or that? I said, I guess I have a little bit of grim, darkish things, but I said it's really not grim dark. I said
sure.
it's more just like Forgotten Realms. I feel like they really left a hole, in the publishing world, particularly for fantasy. And I really
Yeah,
think that people need to fill it because, I'm a teacher, I have certain things that I'll put in my urban fantasy books. I'm not gonna put in my fantasy
yeah,
books because that's just not what I like to read.
yeah,
I think urban fantasy has different tropes and stuff. So I think that how you described it actually,
totally.
it's like that's what I actually said to Andy Pellick when I was talking about your books. I was like, yep, just to me, it just seems like, fill in that gap of Forgotten Realms, just like just good, clean, like fantasy fun, having, and I think
Yeah,
people think clean, they think different things, but
sure.
just like,
Yeah, there's,
yeah, violence or some of this and that, but nothing like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, like
Sure, you
super,
got
like,
sword fights and stuff, and
yeah,
people
yeah,
getting
yeah,
speared and falling off of griffins. I mean, those
yeah,
things are going to happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
Well, my
I
mom's
mean,
always
it's
like,
not
we were talking
like
about it, like,
grotesquely violent. You know
yeah,
what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's totally different than Grimdark, where you like, have somebody like, I don't know, just like talk about their entrails or something. Yeah, it's just
yeah,
like,
like they're spewing out, right?
yeah, 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 yeah. I always call it like the
Yeah,
PG-13 fantasy, or whatever. But
yeah,
because my
sure, right,
mom was like, she just
exactly.
bought them all the time for me, and she's like, "Oh, I probably should have been like worried about you were reading." I was like, "No," I was like, "There wasn't like sexual content, or I
No,
said
right,
people died, but I was like, it wasn't like they were." Like there was never crazy stuff happening. So I don't know. To me,
right,
that's just why I like to write because that's what I really enjoyed reading. So I
right,
totally get that.
exactly,
Yeah. It's just fun just
exactly,
to turn your brain off because I agree with you. There's
right,
certain fantasy where you're just like, oh my God, I feel like I'm like at work right now, or like it's too like the
yeah,
real world. I'm like, no,
right,
I want to
right,
read fantasy. I want to be riding on the back of a griffin. I want some magic.
right,
I want some swords and I want some adventure. So I definitely,
exactly.
definitely agree with you there. Which is where I'm enjoying Stone and Sky. So can't wait
Yes,
to get back to it.
that's
I was
right.
telling I was telling some people before I started recording and then this week that like I'm reading a current book that I thought I was really gonna enjoy and I'm not. So I'm really anxious to get it done and review it nicely and then move back to your
Review
book,
it
Stone and Sky,
nicely and
Andy
then move back.
Peliquin's, yeah, First Acid books. I can't wait to get back to what I
Yeah,
actually want to read. So
right.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
awesome.
I'm
So
kind of
speaking
in
of
the
which,
middle of
yeah.
a similar situation. I've got
Mm,
one that I'm kind of like, all right, I think I'm ready to move on from this. Let's
yeah, yeah,
just knock it
yeah.
out, finish it up, and move
I have
on.
such a hard time DNFing. I'm like, if I'm gonna put work into it, I'm gonna get it done and try to learn something from
Oh
it,
yeah.
particularly as a writer. But like sometimes it's just so this one isn't that bad, but I read one a while back that was like that, and it felt like I was like at a job, and I think it was only like 120 pages, but like, I was just like, oh, I can't wait to get done. And I was reading like Anthony Ryan's like amazing like Pilgrims of the Swords, and
See,
one of his novellas in his
and
series. It's just absolutely amazing, and
you
oh
you
yeah,
multi-read too, don't you? You've got a few
I
books going
do.
at the
Yep,
same. I do too. And
yep,
then you're
have
like,
to.
I don't really want to go back to the like I'll just stay
Yep.
over here and keep reading these ones.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I
It's
think maybe
tough.
later on I'll go back. Yeah, yeah. Especially if you really
Yeah.
like something else or someone else is writing it. It tends to be tough that
Yeah,
way,
right,
but at least I
right.
keep
Yeah,
reading, and particularly as a writer, I think I get
right.
more out of it. But so this is my favorite
Yeah, and
question
you
to ask
learn.
people. Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah.
Um, so what is your Stone and Sky series about, and how did you come up with this idea?
Yeah. So Stone and Sky is about the first book is about a Griffin Guardian. I have these guys called the Griffin Guard in my world of Stone and Sky, the world of Finlestia,
Oh,
and
that's cool.
they're the guardians of the people, right? And they fight off the wyvern riding orcs of the north. And he is the lone survivor of his squadron, and he ends up being saved by a local huntsman's family, and they join forces with a couple of other ragtag members, and they go on an epic adventure to try and get him home so he can get back into the fight. Along the way, they find out, oh, there are actually bigger problems than we expected. And they end up going on this whole side journey that they did not expect to happen, all the while trying to get him back. I also like to play with other people groups in my world, and one of the people groups I really enjoyed playing with in Stone and Sky was the orcs, and I won't go too much into detail there, but I really liked playing with one orc in particular throughout the book, so that was really fun too. But the whole reason that this came up was so I was in the Air Force. My dad was in the Air Force before me. And
Oh, cool.
so aerial combat has always been a thing in my world. It's just always been a thing. I've always had airplanes flying over me.
Mm.
And I thought to myself, you know what? I would really love to see like some aerial combat in some fantasy, like some really
Yeah, yeah.
good aerial combat where these where we're flying around on these different creatures and fighting midair. And I thought that was really the premise. That was the thing that
Oh, that's
started it
awesome.
all. And I was like, okay, let's figure that out. Let's go there.
Yeah.
And so we did. And here we are, uh, the Preludes collection and a book published. And the second book is going to second phase of editing this week. And I'm like,
Oh, cool.
okay.
That
And
cover,
I've got,
that one's really cool too.
oh, dude, right? That cover is oh, same painter. She's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll keep her forever if I can.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
uh, actually, we really have enjoyed working together. So we've already been talking about some later books that I haven't
Oh, that's
gotten to
awesome.
yet. But uh, and that is a wonderful thing. If you can find a cover artist that you love and you can work together well, try to stay with them if you can
Yeah,
and
for as
create
long
that
as possible.
relationship, right? Yeah,
Till they become Felix Ortiz and become too
yeah,
expensive or
yeah,
like too
ride or
busy.
die until
Or
they're too
Sean.
big for you. Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Until they're too big for you. Um, but uh, it's and I have ideas. Like I have crazy ideas for this world at this point. But it all started with this idea of, man, what if there was like a fantasy world where like there was a lot of aerial combat because they all
Mm,
rode different, all the people groups rode different
that's cool.
creatures. And you know, so like the elves ride Pegasi, and
Mm,
the men ride griffins, and the orcs ride wyverns, and the dwarves ride these things called garvox that I just had to make up because I was like they don't exist, so I gotta there's no like awareness of this, so I gotta just let's make something. And they're basically panthers with bat-like wings, and the dwarves
man, my
ride
favorite
them.
animal.
And dude, right? And they and they're just and they're magical creatures. The dwarves like have to go on a hunt to actually catch them, and wizard like mages have to magically put a spell over them, and then a certain dwarf has to wake them up, and when they wake them up they become bonded, and so
Mm.
like that's their creature, and then when they're done with them they whisper the magic words, and the panther, the garvok, turns into stone again. It's dude,
Oh,
they're
that's
wicked
cool.
cool and savage and
Yeah, yeah.
awesome. But
That's
I
awesome.
just was like, let's make this world where all these different people groups ride different flying creatures and see where we can go with this. And it's been really fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's awesome. It's like definitely right up my alley, so that makes total sense. Well, I'm really curious in terms of like what type of magic system you've created for your world, and if like any of these creatures like the griffins, I know certain people do certain things, with their
Yeah,
magic
yeah,
system. So I was curious about your
sure.
magic system and how you came up with that, and if it had anything to do, with any of your creatures, like the griffins, wervins, pegasi, things like that.
Yeah, so for my magic system, it's a little bit secretive right now. I have it
Mm,
under kind of under lock and key right
even
now
better.
because uh, because the magic in the world, a lot of the magic in the world plays a major part in the plot of this first trilogy, and
Oh,
so
cool.
I've got a lot of that locked under key, like lock and key right now. Um, but what I can tell you is it seems very it's pretty loose for the most part, and it seems pretty loose probably while reading this, but there is an undercurrent that um hasn't been revealed yet.
Oh, that's cool.
If I could say that without if I can dodge the question.
It's always hard. I feel like it's always hard for magic because like I have certain things where I'm like, yeah, like because I like have a heist book with these thieves and but like it's like I chose the heist because it's fast paced, you know what to expect. You can learn a lot about the characters and parts of the
Yeah,
magic system, but I also have different things that I'm not revealing till later about it because you don't really
right.
need to know. So yeah, so I totally
Yeah.
understand that. And people always ask me like what about this and this? And I'm like, oh, I totally solved that problem. I was like, or it's in the story, but I'm like, you really have to. I was like, I don't want to give it
You'll see.
away.
You'll see
So
what that is.
yeah,
Yeah,
just
you
buy the
do a lot
damn
of the
book.
you do a lot of the you'll see. You'll see. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that'll all make
yeah.
sense later.
That was me all last night when two people were asking me because I just happened to be talking to two different authors about it, and then they're like asking me that. But it's nice when you talk about an author versus a customer, right, or a reader because most readers
Sure.
will say the same thing, like, oh, cool, but an author's gonna be like, oh, I gotcha, and do the finger
Oh yeah.
guns,
Oh, I got.
because
I see what you're. I got you. I
yeah,
get you.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
get it. I get
yeah,
it.
yeah,
They
yeah.
won't
Well,
give you
it's like
too much guff. They'll be like, oh yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. I just think I was just like nice when people were asking me. They're like, "Oh no, I get it." They're like, "I'll just read it." I'm like, "Thank you." Like, you're like, you
Oh,
wish more
thank
readers
you.
would be like that.
That's
Yeah,
yeah.
you're like, I wrote three books. If you
If
could just
only
read one of
more
them.
of you would be that way, right? Yeah,
No,
if you
totally.
started somewhere, right?
Well, the thing is I was just talking to like HC Newell about this, like, and she made a comment. Can't remember, but I asked her a question, she made a comment. She was like, well, and I was like, wait a minute. I was like, you have like, these four books, and I was like, anything else that you do, where you have four of, like, I have two master's degrees, it's like even one master's degree
Yeah,
is a big deal, for a lot of
yeah,
people for their job, but it's like but like you could write seven books and people still think, oh, they don't know what they're doing. And it's like you might be, differently skilled than somebody else, but like you definitely know what you're doing because you wrote seven books. So it's always funny when
right. Yeah,
authors are like, oh, I've
yeah.
only wrote three books. You're like, what? Like, like
Like,
that's a
bro,
big deal.
you're
So
fine. Yeah, like,
yeah,
what are you
yeah, yeah,
talking
yeah.
about? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I always think with that with
It's the
authors too. Like I'm like, if you have multiple books, if you have one book, I'll read it. But like if you have multiple, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna try, one of your books because like
yeah.
you clearly know what you're doing. So yeah,
You've clearly put forth the effort to um,
totally.
hone your craft and process.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, I mean, even the second, even writing the second book, I've seen such drastic improvement just in the cleanliness of my of my writing, the crispness, just everything is so much easier this time around. And through the first edits, it was just like, oh man, so much better, so much cleaner, so much less red, just because you learn, right? And you're just
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
better at it. And so when you see people actually get a few books in, okay, they're getting, they're progressing, they're getting
Yeah,
better,
yeah, yeah.
and they're working on the craft, right? So I totally get that. Yeah.
Well, it's like
But
certain
it's
authors
weird.
who will not be named, but like like there was one where I'm thinking where it's like their first book, when I went to read it, I read it after like 40 of their other books, and I went like when their first book, and I was like, oh, this is a lot different. And I was like a kid, I was like about 18, and my friend was like,
Yeah.
yeah, because that's like and I didn't know it was the first book they, had written. And they're like, yeah, that's before they did
Yeah.
all these other ones. And I was like, oh, I was like, that makes total sense. And that was like a very
Yeah.
young lesson that I had, in terms of like a writer. So I just started writing a few years before that. So now as an adult, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I know my first book's going to be far different that's why I'm actually saving my
Sure.
fantasy book. Personally, I'm saving my
Yeah.
a heist book for after a couple of things I publish because I don't want it to be the first thing I publish because I've been working on
Right.
it and really trying to hone my craft for it because I really want it to hit a certain way.
Right. Right. Right.
But yeah, but like totally, I just think it's
Yeah.
interesting where you're like, yeah, people are like, yeah, that person's only written like 10 books. Yeah, I'm not gonna read anything. I'm like, what? I'm like,
What,
like if
dude? Are you
somebody else
crazy?
did, yeah, if somebody else started 10
It's not like the
restaurants,
first book can't be enjoyable. You know what I
exactly.
mean?
That's another thing
Like the
too.
first
Yep.
book,
No, totally.
even if it's not their best book, look, I get it. Like, it's your first book. It's not going to be your best book, period.
Yep.
But it doesn't make it not like it couldn't be enjoyable. It very well
Yeah,
could
yeah,
be.
yeah.
You know what I
Yep.
mean?
No,
It's
totally. I've
crazy.
had books like that where I'm like, oh, I'm like, there's some things I would change or whatever, but I love the premise or the characters or the world
Yeah.
or
And I
whatever, and I
still
just
had
had
fun
fun.
reading
So
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. I'm like, is it gonna win an award? No, but I enjoyed it and I'll read the next one. So, but I always want to
Yeah.
point that out to people
I'll
because I
be
think
excited to
people,
read it.
yeah, I just think people don't, like don't think about that, like they're like, oh, it's
Yeah.
gotta be
Right.
a winner of this award right away as first book. I'm like, probably not,
And people get
probably not,
caught
but
up in things.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
People
No,
get caught
totally.
up in things, and then we end up doing the comparison game, and
Yep. Yep.
comparison is not a good game to play, friends.
No, I totally agree. That's totally true. Um, so when it comes to your versions of Griffins, how did you create
Yeah,
them in terms of your world and story? And I'm trying to find ways of making mine unique. And
sure.
I've
Yeah.
seen some interesting ways that people have done that. So I was just curious, like how you created yours and what you think really makes them unique, like in terms of like your world or your world building.
Yeah, sure. So, one thing I've been trying to do is I came up with kind of a naming system for my griffins. So, like the Guardians that ride with the griffins, they there's like this weird naming convention. So like there's a griffin named Silverwing, uh, because he's got wings with silver feathers, right? There's another one called Shadow Paw, because she's got black paws, right? There's another
Oh,
one
that's
called
cool.
Rocktail because his tail has this gravelly look to it, right? So I that was one thing that I did that I was like, that's kind of
That's cool.
become a thing. And
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
okay, let's go with it, you know. And then and that's just kind of a naming convention thing that I thought was kind of fun and
No,
unique
that's
and weird.
cool.
But then the other thing that I've been really hitting hard is, and I may have hurt myself in the process. No, I'm just kidding. But like it's created boundaries for me, which has been interesting, because the griffins and guardians are paired up when they're young, and they become almost bonded in a way where usually griffins, if their rider is killed, the griffin can never be, paired with another guardian, right?
Oh, cool.
Um, and usually guardians, if their griffin is killed, they can never be paired up with a new
Mm,
griffin, uh, just because they have that relationship, that through their bonding process. Uh, in the books, there is a character who is breaking that barrier, and it becomes more evident and more increasingly more important to the story as we move on in books, because it is such an unheard of thing
mm.
for them in their world. Another thing that I did with the Griffins was, so I wrote some backstory and lore on it about how the Griffin Guard actually got all of their griffins originally from the dwarves.
Mm,
The men didn't know how to husband the griffins, so it
mm.
was the dwarves that were husbanding, doing all the husbandry, and then they ended up teaching the men how to do it. Uh, you know, hundreds of years ago. So I've done a few different things with lore and a few different things with, like a bonding process, and then of course the naming convention. And uh, it's been really interesting. I've gotten to explore a
Yeah.
little bit. I'm exploring a little bit with different types of birds too.
Oh,
Um,
that's cool.
so griffins that are, obviously a griffin is a bird in the front, or traditionally an eagle in the front and a lion in the back. For example, this one's more of a crow in the front, and a lion in the back. And I'm doing a little bit with like an owl in the front
Oh,
and
that's
the
cool.
lion in the back and that kind of stuff. So I'm doing some experimenting with it as well, and it's just fun, man. Like you can
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
can just do whatever you want. But once you lay something down in stone, you're like, okay, now I gotta follow that rule here. Let's make sure we don't mess that up. So it's been interesting.
No, that's cool. I definitely did that myself with mine, where I was like, oh, I kind of went a little bit further with the bonding process and incorporated it with the Griffin Riders magic, but like I kind of
Yeah.
made it where they like overloaded it almost, if that makes sense, where like they can't do other magic, they can only do this thing, and then it goes
Oh,
generationally.
interesting.
So
Yeah.
then, yeah, so then like, I'm a Griffin Rider, I have my Griffin. Well, I trained, to fight on the Griffin and everything really well. We work really well together, but
Yeah.
um, oh, I can't give it away. But like, so there's like they have to fight this other country, but like the other country is all made up of sorcerers. But they don't know the animal husbandry, like you were saying, stuff like that. So
Right,
like
right.
they have these things, but then there's this third country that comes in is trying to get these two to war. So I'm gonna leave it at that. Well, there's things that happen, and mine's all about how my Griffin core is created.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I was trying to think of different things, but it's funny that you say that because I feel like I've read so many things about griffins because anytime somebody puts something like that in, I read it. And I just want to point this out to our audience. If you're a writer, like I can't think of anything that I've read that even remotely comes close to what you're saying, other than they have griffins. You know what I'm saying? Like, and like, yeah, they
Yeah,
bonded and
yeah.
stuff, but like not like you've said. So I just think it's cool, and because we're like, oh, everything's already been done. It's like, no, like all you got to do is tweak a couple things, here and
Yeah, you
there,
tweak a few
and it
things
makes it
and
unique. Yeah. And that makes me
and it
want to read it,
changes the whole
So
world for the
exactly. Yeah. Yep.
yeah.
Yep. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that
Even
that's really
little
cool.
even
But
little nuances can change the whole
yep.
world.
Like even your naming
Yeah.
convention, I'm like, oh, that's really neat. I'm like, why didn't I think of that? Like, that's really cool. Like, because that's like, I always tell people, I'm like, well, I just want to point out, like, not that that's not a great idea, but like that, I think people think it has to be like earth shattering, for to make world building cool,
Right.
like,
Right.
that's something that's really unique, but like, isn't earth shattering, I would say, and like,
But it's really a
you know what I
minor
mean? Like,
detail, and most of the
it
time
is,
readers
but it's
won't even
cool.
really recognize it at
Yeah. Yep.
first
Yep.
until, after you see several griffins, and then you're like,
Yep.
huh. And maybe you'll catch on to it, and half the time you won't, right? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
But it's really cool
even
when you
little
say it. I'm like,
things can
oh.
just build it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think it, well, I think it's just like, I just want to point out because it's just such a great example. We've had quite a few on here. So anytime somebody has such a great thing for world building, I'm like, that's what you really need, I think, not necessarily like this ancient empire that stretched this far was like Atlantis or I don't know, whatever. And I just
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that sometimes people strive too hard to come up with a cool thing, or I think you just come up with something that you find is interesting and put it in, like you did. And I think that that
Totally.
really, yeah, I think it'll come out more to the reader, and the world will feel,
Yeah,
fuller
sure.
because of it, So, but I think people think they have to do,
Yeah.
all this exposition or whatever. I don't know, but it's just like little kernels like that to me as a fantasy, author and reader. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I'm like, that's gonna make me read. So that's gonna make me read your
Yeah,
book. So
right.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
But
It's like
yeah,
little
that's
minor
awesome.
details that make you go, oh,
Yep.
that's kind of neat. I
Yeah, yeah,
never
yeah, yeah.
considered it takes you into a whole different space, right? It takes you into this
That's a good
fantasy
way to
space.
put it.
I never really considered something like this. Well, welcome to fantasy.
Yep.
You
Well,
know what
like
I
you
mean?
just said,
Uh,
like, yeah, well, like your preludes, Griffin, I literally showed my wife, I was like, this is what I'm talking about. And she was just like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, no, I'm like, yeah. So I showed it to my buddy and I was like, this is what I was saying. As I was like, I like this representation. Because I said I
Yeah.
was really struggling, with how other people, had represented their Griffin. I like yours and I like how Richard, Lee Byers has his on the Captive Flame books and stuff. And those are
Yeah.
like I think the
Yeah.
two best representations I've seen so far of like what I always picture in my head. So I was like, it was so cool to also see,
Yeah.
that Griffin in black because
That's
I'm
high
a
praise.
gray. Oh man,
Love
I was
being
like,
in
that's
that
so
in the realm
cool.
with
Yeah,
Richard. That's amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No.
I was like, oh, that's so cool, So yeah, so it's super cool. But yeah, I just want to point that out. But yeah, it's really cool. Anytime you can be paired with Richard on this podcast, it's a good day.
I
So
Hey, that's right. Yeah, I'm having a great day. This is wonderful.
I'm glad I could help somewhat because you're pretty much midday, right? Like
Yeah.
about
Yeah,
I
right,
just
right.
need
Yeah,
to give you a boost
exactly.
today.
And we're on the upswing here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's awesome.
That's funny.
So what sorts of fantasy influence, speaking of Richard and Bob, so what sort of fantasy influences did
Yeah.
you have when creating your story, characters, and the Griffin Guard itself?
Yeah, so a lot of course, I'm with you. Huge fan of Forgotten Realms books, Dragonlance. I mean,
I love
these
Dragonlance.
classic, dude, right? Classic style fantasy, right?
Yep.
I Barbara Hambly, all those
Ooh.
guys, and I just it's so when I got glasses, I was behind the curve, right? I'd missed like it was like I was 22, bro. Like I'd missed 22 years worth of reading books, right? So I started going back and grabbing classic stuff. I started
Yeah,
reading
yeah.
like old stuff. I mean, like I've got Edgar Rice Burroughs back there. I
Oh
got,
man, I
like
love John
uh,
Carter.
dude, I know, right? Old Sherlock Holmes. I mean, I went back, bro. I like went way back. But then like I found that I loved classic style stuff, especially like I really got into like H.P. Lovecraft and Poe
Mm,
and some of these more like gothic style authors. And then I kind of found I found R.A. Salvatore and all these guys and started reading and I kind of got this really nice blend of okay, I got to leave some of this old language out because some of my horror stories are very gothic, right? Very old school. It got really old words like fetter and other things that people are like, what is that, right? That people have to look up. So I had to sort that out, but then I really obviously I found Forgotten Realms books, and of course because my brother and I used to tell each other like we didn't have Dungeons and Dragons books or anything like that, but we used to do the same thing. just
Mm.
like we were in bunk beds. Like I'd be on the top bunk, he'd be in the bottom bunk.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
when we are supposed to be sleeping at night, we were telling each other, just, choose your own adventure, epic
Oh, that's awesome.
fantasy stories, right? And so it was our own D&D, right? And so jumping into these books, it was just like, this is amazing. This is my space. This is where I should be. And of course, writing these books, it was like, yeah, that's the space I want to be in.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to write, because that's what I love to read, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I just found a recent, and so this one didn't really influence anything in my writing, but I did just read it recently. Actually, I take that back, because some of the scenes and the way that I do them in Stone and Tide, which is the second book coming out in February, the some of the things that I did in there actually kind of did morph during revisions a little bit because of
Mm.
this book. It's called The Rover by Mel Odom. I don't
Oh,
know
yeah,
if you've
yeah,
ever,
yeah, yeah.
dude.
Mel Odom, right?
Yeah, Mel Odom.
Yeah.
He's written for
He had a
Forgotten
couple
Realms,
Forgotten
and
Realms. Yep.
that's
Yeah,
right. That's
loved his
right.
books. Yep, loved his
Uh,
books. I haven't read The Rover in like I started it back in high school and I actually
oh
keep meaning to
man,
go back and finish it. And
The
actually
Rover
I
was
think I saw
so much
your
fun.
TikTok. Yep. I added it back
Yeah,
to my
dude.
list. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
so much fun. It just was. It was that. It was epic fantasy adventures. Let's go. That's what it was, and it
Yeah, yeah.
was so much fun. But it's that stuff that I love that totally goes into everything I do in this series. So yeah,
Well, it's funny because I talked to my students, we're doing a personal history project, and I'm like, I know they don't really want to talk about anybody, old that is, not here anymore. So I was like, well, let's talk about starting off. Let's do something that you do know, first of all, and which is you, and or at least you should, and then I have a bunch of cool lessons I'm doing off of their like mini project. But one
yeah,
kid like asked me a question. I go like, why don't you just do something that you love to do? He's like, what? I was like, do you like video games? He goes, yeah, I love this video game. I go, well, that's an interest of yours. I go, do your
yeah,
project on this, 3D print something, whatever. Do a pamphlet, a brochure about the
yeah.
game. I was like, pick something that you're really interested in. I said, then it won't feel like a project for school. I go, you'll just do it and you'll learn something.
Boom.
And I think
Yeah.
that's like exactly what authors and writers should do. Like I'm really Paul S. Kemp. I'm looking at you if you ever see this. I love Paul. I love his Hammer and the Blade series.
Hmm.
So if you have not read it, absolutely amazing. I think it's right up your alley. So it's very like Fritz Lieber, with Farhad and the Gray Bowser, and he's got these two thieves that are buddies, and they get in all
Yeah.
this trouble and have to do some things that are good, but they're not quite sure if they want to. And it's really cool sword and sorcery world. So I was like, oh, I really like that. So I'm like writing a Kindle Vella series, about a shadow walker thief, and a war priest that get like meshed together lethal weapon style. And I was just
Dude.
like,
Yeah.
I love those books. And I was listening to them on Audible after I had read them and I just was stuck. So before I go and publish anything else, I gotta finish this like 50 episode, 5 season like thing. But I'm like, I'm enjoying writing it so much and I
Yeah.
keep going over and over and over again to try and flesh it out. And my friend, he's like, you seem really into it. I said, well, I want to do like an anthology eventually. I said, maybe these guys do deserve, their own books, actual books or
Sure.
something.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm like, it doesn't feel like writing. It just feels like I'm just hanging out
And
with a couple of friends.
that's right. And if it's the one that keeps coming back to you, it's
Yep.
the one that
That's a
keeps
good one.
coming at you, then
Yep.
you probably ought to write that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I agree.
You know
I
what I mean?
agree.
Like,
I
if it's the one that keeps getting you, I
yep.
mean, hello. If it's the one that keeps you up at night, people,
Yep.
have you seen the TikTok thing about people, or girls asking their husbands or their
Yep,
boyfriends
yep, yep. The meme. Yep,
if
yep,
they're
yep.
thinking about the Roman
Yeah.
Empire, how often?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
I maybe in some respect, but like I got this whole fantasy universe in my brain. So if those guys are thinking about, while those guys are thinking about the Roman Empire, I'll tell you,
Yeah,
my
yeah,
brain
yeah.
is thinking about this entire fantasy universe that I've got in my brain, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Like
so
constantly.
that's right, right, right. If that's the thing that keeps coming up, maybe you should, maybe that's the thing you
Yeah,
should
yeah, yeah.
write.
No, totally. I think that's just great advice. And it keeps coming up in our 3 seasons. So I'm just like, I actually had somebody ask the other day, and I was like, "Have you learned nothing?" And he's like, "I've watched every
Yeah.
episode." I'm like, "And you're not?" I was like, "He's like, I think I'm gonna write this thing, but not this thing." So I won't say their name. I'm looking at you right now. But it's like,
Thanks
just
for
write the
calling
thing that
me
you want to
out.
write. Yeah, write the thing you want to write is what I always say. But because I then it won't seem like work. But yeah,
Yeah, right. Exactly. Then you're
and
loving
I
it
think
and
it'll.
you're just having
Yeah,
fun with
exactly.
it. And I don't
Yeah.
think enough people are having fun anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I think
Period.
it's more of like
Just
a
in general.
business and yeah, like, and I get it. You want to sell books. Well, people always ask me, like, I talked to somebody a while back privately. They're like, "Well, I'm really worried about my first book," and I'm like, "What are you worried about?" They're like, "No one's gonna
Yeah.
like it." I go, "Somebody's gonna read it. Somebody's gonna like it." I go, "It might
Somebody's
take
gonna
you
like it.
longer to find them." Yeah, I'm like, but and then they're like, "Well, I'm gonna quit after that." I go, "Really?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, what are you gonna do?" I'm like, "I'm gonna write one, and no, nobody likes it. I'll write a second one. I'll write a third one." And I got to
I'll
like
write the
15.
next
They're
one.
like, "Okay, I get it." Yeah, I'm like, I write for me. I write for
Yeah.
me because it's
I
fun.
write it because
And
I
I
like it. And
exactly,
there will
yeah,
be other people. Believe it or not, humans do connect with other humans, even if
yeah,
we're introverts. Okay. The fact of the
yep.
matter is, we do connect with other humans,
That's why
and
they're
there
books.
are going to be other humans that are going to be like you and like this.
Yep.
So
I was like,
it
there's
might
like
take a while
eight
to find
billion
them. That's it.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I said. I was like, there's 8 billion people in this world. Someone's gonna like your book.
That's right. That's right.
You might
That's
have to get
right.
it translated, but somebody will like
But
it.
somebody's gonna like it. You're gonna find them. You just gotta
Yeah,
look.
yeah. And that's the funny thing too about this podcast is like I just said before we got recorded, I had some people like, every time I think I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna finish this season and be done for a while. And then I just have like the coolest stuff happen or the coolest people message me or I all of a sudden they're like all these people flood in and say like, oh hey, blah blah blah. I'm like, it is so hard to get subscribers. I'm like, it's so hard, to do X, Y, and Z. But
Oh,
that's where like I
no
enjoy
joke.
talking to people like you. So I'm like,
Yeah,
and I just do it for me and I just put it up and I just share it or
that's
whatever. And
right.
I'm like, well, if it something happens, or people want to blow it up, feel free, whatever. But as long as we're getting out there and producing something where you get to talk and sell more of your books, and then that means I actually get to read more of your books, then I'm totally fine with that. Christopher G. Brenning,
Yeah,
my
it's a
friend, is always
win-win,
like,
right?
yeah, well, he's like, oh, thanks for sharing this. And I'm like, it's not altruism, Chris. I'm like, his first book was one of the first books of anybody's that I was like, God, this is such a great book. And it was his first
Yeah,
book. And I'm like, I was helping him out because I really wanted him to do a book two. And then he did
yeah,
a book two, and now he does a prequel. And now he's working on book
yeah,
three. And I'm like, I keep sharing them, and I'm like, I really, really want more books. So
yeah,
it's a selfish,
yeah,
selfish
yeah.
thing and need.
I'm not
I love
helping
it.
you. I'm trying to
I'm
spur
helping
you
me.
on to
Exactly. Yep.
help
Yep.
me.
Totally. I just need more books.
Feed
My
me
wife's like, do
more.
you?
Hurry,
Yeah.
let's go. You're doing great.
She's like,
Let's go.
yeah. She's like, do you really need more books? I'm like, yes. I go, half of them I get now, people send me, or I get them, free or on sale or whatever. I'm like, my Kindle. She goes, your Kindle is just like library is just huge. I was like, but I needs them,
Yeah,
Like,
I must
my
have them.
precious. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, exactly.
I need more.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
thank God Gollum only had one ring to worry about, right? Now we have all these books.
That's right.
This is one of my favorite questions to ask people. Speaking of
Yeah.
adventure, so we talked a lot about this. If you could go on an adventure with one of your characters, who would it be and why?
Okay, so you sent me this one, and I thought about it for quite a bit. This one was funny to me because I was like, man, every event, like it depends who I pick is going to change the adventure that I
No,
have
it's totally
for
true. Yeah,
sure.
it's totally true.
Because like if I go with like this halfling named Tobin, who is so much fun. He's so jolly and joyful, but he talks nonstop, right? Like, I mean, I thought he was hilarious writing him because I tend to like not speak first. I tend to have a very like slow to speak personality, but man, this dude just talks, right? And so for me, it was like really funny to write him because he was just like so polar opposite to me in that respect. And so I was like, at first, when I saw this question, I was like, oh, I go with Tobin because he's so much fun. He's just like, he would be some, and then I was like, oh, but like he would talk the whole time. And he would drive me absolutely crazy. Actually, maybe not. Maybe not Tobin. Maybe not
I
Tobin.
throw him off the griffin.
Yeah, yeah, right. Maybe not you. Let's go with somebody else. And then so I
That's
started thinking
awesome.
about, okay, well, I got this dwarf named Cole, and he and his buddy Azil, Cole and Azil are like they're like a pair. So I know wherever Cole goes, Azil's going to be there too. So I really get two with one, right? So I was like, okay, if I was going on an adventure with them, I get to hang out with both of them. And Azil is this, he's a deep gnome, and he's a mute. He doesn't speak, which is a really interesting and unique dynamic. Um,
I
but
see your
that's
R.A.
a whole other
Salvatore
thing.
influence there. I see you.
Hey,
Yeah.
right? There's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I like
That's
to
a
throw
the
some
claret
different things in
quintet.
there.
I like it.
There
Yeah,
you go.
yeah.
And then so like I was like those guys would be so much fun, and we could go out on the sea and hang out with pirates, and we could do all sorts of fun stuff, right? It'll be crazy, right? But then I was like, well, no, 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 hang on. What I really want to do is I want to go flying on one of the flying creatures. If I get to go
It's
into this
fair.
world, I want to go fly with one of the flying creatures.
Yeah.
So I decided I would have to be part of the Griffin Guard just because I would actually get to fly around on a Griffin. And it really doesn't matter which one I go on an adventure with. One of them will do. As long as I get to ride on a Griffin, I would be happy. uh,
I like how they're just like, just give me a Griffin. I was thinking that too. Like, I was like, my friend, he asked me because I was talking about that question for you and HC Newell and somebody else, and he's like, that's not fair. He goes, you write everywhere, like in this genre. He's like, what would you choose? And I was like, that's not very fair because now we're going cross genre. I'm like, you make me
yeah.
choose between my mech sci-fi or my urban fantasy or fantasy. I was like, that's just not fair. He's like, well, it's only fair because you do it to your guests. So I think
Yeah.
that's a good question. So no, that's awesome. Well, that all sounds amazing. So we're
Yeah.
gonna
I
finish up with
decided
that.
I was going to cheat and just answer with a bunch.
But I liked it. But I liked it because you advertised a lot there, and now I'm thinking like, why did I not think of that? Because that's genius. So if anybody asks me that in the anything like that in the future, I'm gonna plug whatever I can plug for that
Yeah,
question. So
there
I
you
think that's
go.
genius. But before we wrap up, I just want to make sure we get this last one because it's always one
Yeah,
of the most
sure.
important ones for me, just because we're here trying to help, you sell your products and anybody that comes on here. So do you have any news updates or current projects that you can share with us before we go?
Yeah, sure. So obviously Stone and Sky just came out, not even a month ago, which is
We're reading
awesome.
it, buy it.
Yes, yes,
I'm
yes.
enjoying it.
Go get Stone and Sky. It's great. And it's
I
really
think I
beautiful,
just want to
actually.
say I think
It's
people
really
would be
nice.
surprised. I won't say the book and the author, but I think people would be surprised that the book I'm reading, where I cannot wait to be done to pick up Stone and Sky again and Annie Peloquin's book one, his assassin book, because I think people will be surprised. And again, it's because I'm like,
Yeah.
this is my jam. So if you think
Yeah,
Epic
right.
Fantasy Adventure is your jam, pick it up.
If Epic Fantasy Adventure is your jam, you got to pick it up. Right.
Yeah,
That's where we're hanging out. We're having fun. Um,
yeah, yeah.
but so like I said, I'm sending out a Stone and Tide. That's the second book. I don't have an image for it. I might, maybe I can send you an image so you could add it right
Oh yeah,
here
yeah,
or
yeah.
something. I don't know. We'll
I could
figure it
do
out.
that. We
Uh,
will. We by
yeah.
then I will have the technology. So
Whoa, whoa, whoa! It's right there. No, it's
now I really want to
Stone and
put it
Tide is
right where you
coming.
put your hands.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh, magic. Um, but it's almost done, which is amazing. I've got two more rounds of edits to go through,
Mm,
because I don't like to play around. I like to make sure that it's as clean as possible. Just,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know what? I feel like it's something you got to do. If you're gonna do this
Yeah,
indie and you're gonna try to do it professionally, you gotta put forth the effort, right?
I agree.
So I'm cleaning it right now. I was editing before I hopped on here with you. I'm editing it right now, and it's going out for second edits this week, and then it'll go out for final edits after that, and then it comes out February 6th, which is epic. So excited for that. Because it just continues the story, and actually we get to go across the sea in the next book, which is
Oh,
going to
that's
be
exciting.
so much fun. Something that I didn't, I envisioned, but until I got to start writing it, I was like, oh man, like I wasn't expecting to get into this. This is great. Like, woo, let's go. Right. So it's been a lot of fun. And it's a lot like it's going a lot better. The process is going a lot better too. So this book I'm really
Awesome.
excited about. And actually, by the time this goes out, by the time this podcast goes out, I think I should be pretty close to done with the first draft of book 3 as well. So
Oh, that's
we're
awesome.
cruising along, guys. It's this
Wow.
is a fantasy world that has a lot to give, and I have lots of ideas to write more books and more trilogies in this space and in this world of Finlandia. So really stoked about that. Um, but yeah, yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot
It is.
going
I'm
on.
glad you said that
Um,
because people
yeah,
normally like, oh, I
there's a
don't have
lot
that
going
much.
on.
That's a lot. Like,
Yeah,
that's a
no.
lot.
Yeah, it's a lot going on. And you know what? If you would like to, if people would like to jump into the world of Finlestia, start jumping in for free. You can totally do that. I have the Stone and Sky Preludes collection that I have. I actually have it as a series, as a standalone, like a series that I send out for anybody who joins the readers list, which they can do at freefantasyfiction.com. So if you want to jump into the world of Finlestia for free, there you go. Freefantasyfiction.com. Easy to remember. And you can jump in and start there.
Well, that's awesome. So just so that our any
Yeah.
listeners, in case you're new and you haven't been here before, you could actually find all of Diamanti's books and social links in the description, anywhere where you can watch or listen to this podcast.
Easy peasy.
So everything will be right there for you. Yeah, we try to make it as easy as possible, so you can just go down and click right there. And I work with kids, so I get that sometimes it's hard to do things. So we try to make it as
Yes.
easy as possible for
Yeah, right,
people.
right. Exactly.
But thank you so much for coming on today. It was really fun. I hope to
Yeah.
have you back again soon. We're going to be doing some really cool things in the winter with different seminars and things like that, where we have several authors come, and we've already talked a little bit and email through a topic, and then we're going to kind of debate it and kind of go from there. So,
Yeah,
so
very
I'll be
cool.
sending those kind of things out. So yeah, look
That'd be
forward to,
fun.
having you on for some of those. We could do,
Yeah, no,
some
it's
Griffin stuff
great.
together with Richard Lee Byers and
Yeah.
like fulfill a
Oh man,
lifelong
fulfill
dream of
life
mine.
dream.
So exactly. Check. Like interviewing him was awesome. Check. And then
Check
he's
on
like,
the
"Oh,
bucket
do you
list.
yeah, yeah." He's like, "Do you want anybody else from Forgotten Realms?" I was like, "Everybody. Who do you have? Give me
Everybody, yeah.
everybody." So yeah, I was
Whose
like slowly
number do
checking
you
them off.
have?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
got Bob's email. Bob's like,
Yeah,
"What?"
right. He's like,
All right. Well,
Richard, stop.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Stop sending me these fanboys. Yeah, but I just want to also remind our audience
Oh,
too,
that's funny.
that it's so important for indie authors, but really anybody, creators, voice actors. I have artists coming on, like editors, all sorts of people. It's just so
Yeah,
important again, just to remind people, if you're on Audible, if you're on Amazon, if you get the paperback, hardcover, whatever, just please make sure you are reviewing any product.
yeah, totally.
Because it's really going to help everybody out, but
It's huge.
particularly newer authors, particularly, really anybody that's just creating. So yeah, I just want to, we keep trying to plug that the last 2 seasons, because I think people still
It's a
forget
big
that
deal.
Audible and Amazon are not connected. So,
Right.
anytime you're on Audible, you got to go back to Amazon. I've been doing it like crazy and, backtracking a bunch of reviews and stuff. I think I have like
Yeah.
70 books. I have like maybe 10 left on Amazon,
Yeah.
that I have to
Nice.
go.
Yeah.
But yeah, just want to remind people. But
It's a big
again,
deal.
just trying to plug that. Yeah, it really is. But again, thank you so much for coming on. And, I look forward to, talking to you on TikTok, my friend. If there's anything I can do,
Yeah.
at all for you, like I said, just, hit me up on TikTok or, email me, message me, where to find me. And,
Yeah.
I'll help you in any way I can. So
Yeah. Sounds good, brother. I appreciate you having me on here.
yeah, 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 anytime. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you later.
Will do. Later, guys.
See ya.